Skull Buffs, baby.
The Colorado Buffaloes have fallen once again, this time at the hands of the Arizona State Sun Devils, and now they face Kansas State, trying to avoid the worst season in the Coach Prime era. Attendance is low at the stadium, but they've got one thing to play for, and that is spoiler. Kansas State could clinch bowl game eligibility this week with a win over the Buffaloes, but the Buffaloes do not want that to happen, and that is their motivation against the Wildcats. Here at SBS Football Live, I am Liam Howard alongside Leo Rivera, Lincoln Roach, and Balin Weissef, and we are going to be talking Colorado versus Kansas State today. Starting off, though, let's look back at the Arizona State game. A pitiful game, as although it looked close at first, turned ugly very quickly. We're going to start off with you, Lincoln. What disappointed you in this loss?
Yeah. First, you're saying it looked close at first. It did not look good at first. That 2-hour half was brutal to watch. But, was it our worst football this season? No. Pretty good. But I think what really disappointed me was our absolute inability to do anything with turnovers, right? 4 turnovers, we get 1 Mata field goal, out of it.
Yeah.
And I think also if you look at how ASU used it, right? Fourth quarter down by only 4 points. Great decision to put old Ronald Coleman in. And the next drive, right? 20. They started our 20. They score. That's the game, And I'm just saying, I don't think Lane Kiffin would have put Ronald Coleman in, And that's the thing is, I think Dion needs to start thinking, what would Lane Kiffin do? He wouldn't have put a wide receiver walk-on in as a running back.
Yeah, certainly, and that was there was clear differences between both of the teams, and it was a lot of quick scoring for Arizona State. And when Colorado did score, like you mentioned, it was slow, sluggish, sloppy, barely got there. Balin, we'll go to you next. What did you take away as the disappointments from this game?
Yeah, I don't really want to use the word quit necessarily, but I was just more disappointed in the inability for the Buffs to play 4 complete quarters in my eyes, right? Like Lincoln just said, they were down 4 going into the fourth quarter. Up to that point, they had forced 4 turnovers, only had 3 points off that. And then in the fourth quarter, the defense goes and allows 205 rushing yards, 11 first downs from ASU. It felt like kind of both sides of the ball weren't really helping each other out. When the defense was forcing 4 turnovers, the offense wasn't moving the ball. And then, of course, the defense ended up crumpling late. So really just disappointed, and the Buffs couldn't hang with them for the four quarters of that game.
You mentioned that offense not being able to get going. Leo, what were you disappointed with them?
I mean, it's got to be the 3 and outs, right? It's the inability to have successful plays on first and second down that is really contributing to the failure of this offense. When you come out and your first play is an incomplete pass or it's a negative 2-yard bubble screen because the entire stadium knows that that's coming out on your first play of the drive, and you're setting Julian Lewis up for 3rd and long where he's having to sit back and you could just rush your best 4 or 5 pass rushers and get after him, it's hard. It's hard to win football, and especially when you have these good chances on second down and Omarion Miller is dropping balls and you aren't on the same page with your best players, it makes it really difficult, Liam. And that's been a struggle not only with Lewis, but with Salter. This entire season, Colorado has struggled on the early downs. They've had to punt too many times, and it puts your defense into a bad position. At altitude, it's not an advantage for your defense if they're out on the field the entire time. They're the ones getting gassed. At home, that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go and sort of kick the dead horse a little bit with the play calling. I think that the play calling has not changed all that much, unfortunately, since Pat Shermer's removal from the role, which is concerning. And I think that is sort of the culture that has been built up for this offense, that it needs to be safe, it needs to be checkdowns, they can't trust their players. And while there are guys like Omarion Miller dropping passes, and you hate to see that, I think at the end of the day, if you're Colorado, you desperately need to step up and trust your guys a little bit. You need to have those guys who are your stars try and make a play for you, because that's the only way that they're going to win football games at the end of the day. So I personally did not enjoy watching the Buffaloes play calling. It's just a lack of creativity, and then defense, no adjustments once again. And that's another continuing theme that has really plagued the defense the entire season. And Livingston's still calling the plays there. Maybe that'll change during the offseason, but it waits to be seen. But moving forward, we want to look at maybe what can be built on from this game. What can the Colorado Buffaloes build on potentially from this game? Lincoln, we'll start with you. Was there anything impressive at all?
If we're talking impressive, I hate to say it, I got to talk about a non-CU buff. Let's talk about ASU's Malik Brown, right? 255 yards. Okay. Vast majority of that too in the fourth quarter, and it was a career high for him, really led that team to an impressive fourth quarter win. We should not have been talking about the word blowout, He helped that. And I will mention, our most valuable player, Alejandro Mata.
Of course.
You got when you're really having to lean on the kicker as one of your best players, what's going wrong. But thankfully we do have Alejandro Mata, only got one chance for a field goal, made it, brings him to 90% made field goals this season, his best at Colorado, especially at senior night. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Mata, of course, has been referenced by Coach Prime as the MVP of this team. So it's not just us analysts who are noticing that. It is the own coaching staff of this team that recognizes that Mata is where it's at. But hey, Malik Brown, if they can potentially throw enough money into the portal, maybe that maybe he can be a good thing for the Buffaloes next season. Balin, how about you?
I'm going to stay in that same realm of special teams. I was very impressed by the kick returns, actually, on Saturday night. The pair of freshmen, Quanell Farrakhan Jr. and Quentin Gibson, both had great nights on kick returns. Farrakhan Jr. took 2 punts back for 33 yards, averaged 17 each. And then Gibson took 3 kickoffs back for 55 yards and averaged 18 yards back each time. So in my eyes, it's really kind of the small things like that. What can you do on special teams? Put your team in a good position for that offense to go out there and try to move the ball. Especially kind of after I thought this team had a really hot start on special teams and kind of really declined through the midseason. So I'm glad to see kind of that unit returning to a more productive stance.
Yeah, some aggressiveness there. And Coach Prime has talked about it in the past, wanting these guys to take the ball out of the end zone every once in a while, how he doesn't like how the rules are changing with it and people are just kicking it through the end zone every time. He likes to see those returns, and even though there were some booted into the end zone, these guys were still taking it out. Gibson especially was very aggressive with his returns, so I think that's something that they can at least build on with those young receivers, and maybe it's getting them experience on the field, so that's something to look forward to, I think. Leo, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to be that guy, but let's talk about the offensive line real quick. There's been a lot of injuries to this unit, a lot of reshuffling, and a lot of talk has gone to Yaya Atiu, who's been able to step up and move to left guard. He's had that versatility playing center as well. But let's talk about Xavier Hill, who's had to move from that left guard position out to right tackle on an island on the complete opposite side of the ball in a complete different position, and he's been playing pretty well. He's been playing dominant enough to have a few highlight plays, and not only that, create a good pocket for Julian Lewis to step in and feel comfortable in. Without Jordan Seaton there at the left tackle position, you've had to have Kareem Harden over there. So, Hill's ability to step up and rotate, move over, and play that right tackle made this offensive line a lot more, bulked and reassured than it definitely could have been. And I think last year, this offensive line did not have the depth or the skill for the guys up front to be able to even do this kind of reshuffling. So I think it shows the strength of the coaching staff that's improved in that position, and not only that, the type of guys you brought in from the transfer portal that Colorado was going to have to look to replace and build upon the success that they had this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of stepping up and taking over a position, I'm going to talk about Preston Hodge on the defensive side of the ball. Tawfiq Bayard went down with that injury, and it was like, that's the one anchor of this Colorado defense. And there was still a bit of a gap felt for sure with after his injury. Preston Hodge stepped up and played very well in this game, and that's something that this coaching staff has been looking for out of him all season, and they finally got it. 8 total tackles, 7 were unassisted. He was stepping up and hitting people, and that's what they want from him. 1 pass breakup, and he was playing good in coverage. He was playing sound coverage. The 1 pass breakup comes because they weren't throwing his way all that often, and when you got a guy like Jordan Tyson in that Arizona State offense, that's something that you want to see. So Preston Hodge definitely impressed me for the Colorado Buffaloes. But we got to go back to the negative for a little bit here. Let's talk about the concern for this program. 3-8 is what they are staring down right now. And that is not necessarily the worst that can possibly happen, as we'll talk about, one team that's somehow managing that later in the show, but concerning nonetheless. Lincoln, we'll start with you. What is your concern for the future of this program on a scale of 1 to 10, and why?
Yeah, I went 6. I think I actually might have said 7, but I'm going with 6 here. And I think my biggest issue is, people, the Coach Prime Glazers out there are going to say, oh, it's a rebuilding year. Oh, we lost a Heisman winner, I want to, going back to ASU, Kenny Dillingham, right, loses Cam Scottaboo, goes from a team that wins the Big 12 one year, right, to a most horrendously injured team, and still has a winning season, is still 8-3 in a team he was not supposed to be here with, right? Meanwhile, we have Dion here, losing record at Colorado now, just making it worse for himself, and yet he's paid more than Kenny Dillingham, When we got him in 23, we signed him for $5.5 million a year, right? We had him for 5 years though, right? He's only in year 3, but we had that need to re-sign him because he won 9 games and got us a loss in the Alamo Bowl, right? But look at it now, right? We're going to be paying him, right? He's the highest paid coach in the Big 12 with the second to worst record this year, right? Who had the worst? Well, they don't have a job, Okay.
That's a good point.
And it sucks because we're stuck with him. We can't afford to pay him, and we can't afford to pay his buyout. So we're just going to be here for the next 5 years consistently, sucking, but with the highest paid coach in the Big 12, So I have not much faith in the Colorado Buffaloes going forward.
Yeah, the financial aspect certainly playing a larger role in the Coach Prime re-signing, and then also worries of the school since then, but than the actual play on the field is. But Balin, what would you rate it at?
I'm at a 7 right now. I am actually fairly concerned. I believe that this season truly exposed how dependent this team is on player talent itself. Right, you can look at last year's roster that had 5 NFL-ready players that went to the NFL after that. And when you have that talented of a roster, the coaching staff can craft 9 wins out of that and take you into a bowl game, have some CFP conversations. But now when you look at a team that has just blatantly less player talent, maybe 1, maybe 2 players that could realistically go to the NFL right now, it's just a coaching staff has proved in my eyes that they really can't win without a super talented roster. So I think this season's going to play a bigger impact on losing recruits. Obviously, there's unsure with the new athletic director, the end of Rick George's era. So kind of going back to Lincoln's point, this was the first year of Dion's 5-year contract, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised if there's something along the road where he doesn't take those whole 5 years out at CU.
It certainly would be interesting, but you also mentioned that, Lincoln, that buyout there, if they are going to fire him, that's going to be costly as well. But
well, and here's the thing with that. Everyone I've talked to who actually, was involved in those conversations, the reason wasn't the on-field performance, right? It was he sold out Folsom consistently. He brought the national attention, right? Last 2 games were the least attended, and then broke that record least attended by over 5,000 more seats in the Prime era. We're seeing commit, uncommit. I think that national attention's leaving. I don't know if it comes back. I don't know if it's bringing in that dividends anymore.
Well, and lots of negatives. Do you have any more positive of a note to bring it on?
I actually do, right? Because I think, Colorado missed the transfer portal. That's no secret. Deion Sanders said that himself today at the press conference. But where did you hit? You hit at quarterback. And that's the most important position of all the positions in football. And that, moving forward with Julian Lewis reassuring people saying that he wants to be in Colorado and him throwing out recruiting pitches for other recruits gives you a foundation to at least build on. You have a quarterback, you have a left tackle, and you got a couple other guys like Carday Smith, Chauncey Gooden, who are coming up from the offensive line that you could work with on the offense. And still guys like Draylon Miller, Omarion Miller still have that eligibility. If they're going to be coming back into the following season, you have a core of players to work on. Now, that core went 3-8 so far this season, so that's where you are concerned. And you are a little bit concerned, like Balin said, about the reoccurring issues in coaching. But those are things that can be addressed in the offseason, right? We've seen teams, especially in the transfer portal era, do full rebuilds, go out and find guys who are going to be ready to get the job done. And Coach Sanders acknowledged that, right? He said at the post-game presser on Saturday, changes are going to be made. There's going to be a lot of new coaching faces. It just depends on if they can get that right. And if they can get that right, I think they'll be more on path trending towards the 9 wins again. But on the flip side, there's always that case where it just keeps getting worse. So that's why I think a true neutral at 5 is where I sit.
I'm going to sit at 5 as well. I think that this is, like you said, it's a bit of a younger core right now that is on their way up and being forced to play a lot of meaningful football so far this season. And usually when a team is forced into that position, they don't do all that well. Looking at Coach Prime, I think you got to remember this is a guy who defeated cancer in the offseason and wasn't with his team until just a few weeks before the season started. So I think that if this was a team that was more veteran faces, more star talent, they could have put that together a little quicker. But when you have a team full of youth and full of a lot of guys who have not played yet and really need that guidance into college football, and they're needing the guy who brought them there to do that, and he's not around for the majority of their preseason training. I certainly think that puts you behind really everyone else in the Big 12 to start with, and then they did not do a good job of recovering from it after that. But the fact that he is addressing the coaching changes, I think is very important for this team, and I think that as long as they're able to make those adjustments correctly, like you said, and most importantly, in my opinion, keep this young core together, keep them here, then I think that they can have a bright future. But I still am going to put it at 5 because that is a lot of what ifs. Can they, if they, so that you can't really lean on that if you're Colorado. It's going to need to be those are the things that must unfold for this team to be successful in the future. But that moves us to the future. Kansas State coming up this Saturday. Does Colorado need to focus on one specific player this week, and who needs to be that top priority?
Yeah. I don't think it's one specific player. Obviously, this is a pretty decent team. I think their lack of success, has been on a lot of really small, leads that are lost. But I think if we're talking about one player, I'm going with wide receiver Jace Brown. I would say he's the Lane Kiffin of the Kansas State receiving corps. 712 yards, right, off of just 41 catches. And I think especially with rushing, he's got off 7 carries, he's got 116 yards, 16.6 average, right? 6 touchdowns total, 1 rushing, 5 receiving. I wish Colorado really had a Jace Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. And Balin, I think that you were wanting to stay on the offensive side of the ball as well.
Yeah, I was. I'm going a little more of an under-the-radar pick. I'm going with tight end Garrett Oakley. He currently leads the Wildcats in receiving touchdowns this year. He has 8. Quarterback Avery Johnson's 18 on the year. He's just a true red zone threat. I think a lot of the holes in CU's defense happens really in the middle of that secondary. So I think they're going to need to stress him a lot, especially when Kansas State is in the end zone. They got to keep a very close eye. He's 6'5", 250 junior. When they're in the red zone, definitely keep a close eye on him. I think that's definitely somebody that the defense needs to just prioritize when they're creating their game plan.
And you mentioned that quarterback. There's Leo. What do you got on him?
Yeah, Avery Johnson's the man, right? At least for Kansas State, he was supposed to be coming into this season. One of the Heisman people in the Heisman conversation at the start of the year hasn't quite lived up to that, but that doesn't mean he can't get hot. And you have to respect that, especially at home, fighting for bowl contention. Avery Johnson could use his legs as well. We've seen how much Colorado has struggled trying to navigate those dual threat quarterbacks. So I think if you are the Buffs, you have to respect him. You have to key in on him. And everything starts with the quarterback. It all starts with containing that quarterback. If you put pressure on him, you make him uncomfortable, he's not going to be able to get the ball out to these, tight ends, receivers that you guys talk about. And I think that's where the Buffalo's got to start their focus.
Absolutely. I'm going to go on offense once again as well. I'm going to go with running back Joe Jackson. Just judging on how Colorado played against Arizona State and their failure to limit Raleek Brown, Joe Jackson has to be where they focus. Yeah. This is a guy who, against Utah, the defense that stifled Colorado, put up 293 rushing yards in a single game, along with 3 touchdowns. That is a high-caliber defense that he just did that again against this past weekend, even in his team's loss. He was the spark plug for them, and he is the spark plug for that offense. Former Colorado Buffalo Dylan Edwards might be getting a little bit worried about his spot the way that he has been playing, but 769 total yards on the season. Joe Jackson is a dangerous player for Kansas State and absolutely who the Buffaloes need to focus in on. Next up, though, looking at Kansas State's defense, since we didn't really talk about it in that segment, let's look at their defense now. They have the 5th most points allowed per game in the Big 12. Not a very strong unit. Lincoln, how does Colorado's offense fare?
Yeah, look, I think offensively we're pretty mids, especially if we're putting Caden Salter back at the helm. I understand the decision. I think it's a smart decision, but I think most importantly here, it's going to come down to coaching, and specifically coaching in the fourth quarter. We cannot keep having these errors that just have haunted our season. We cannot be putting a walk-on wide receiver in as a running back with down 4 going into the fourth, right? We cannot burn a timeout just to then kick, with just minutes left in the fourth, with a possibility to come back. We have just had these clock management and just like silly mistakes for all season long. It has cost us several games. If we have any chance at beating them, it's probably going to be a close fourth quarter, and it's going to be, do we figure our stuff out here coaching-wise or not?
Yeah, absolutely. And the veteran leadership of Salter might play into that coaching a little bit, but he seemed to have lost to the team a little bit in his final few games starting. Balin, how do you think that this offense is going to fare with him at the helm?
Yeah, like you said, for how this is, you're playing a defense that has a possibility where you could have a big game and really fine-tune a lot of things. However, I think the offense is going to have another underwhelming day. Kansas State they struggle against the aerial attack, or teams that have a good passing game that normally cannot stop. However, I don't think we can say that confidently that we have a strong passing game. So I just realistically don't see this team, whoever's really at quarterback, score more than 28 points, 24. So we'll see. I think on the road it's also going to play a big point. And I really feel like we've kind of yet to see, at least in the last 4 or 5 weeks, the offense put together a game where everybody does their job. Sometimes we'll see that strange game that the offensive line had against Utah, right? Uncharacteristic, that played a part in the blowout loss. But then on days where the offensive line has, they're a good unit and has good days, sometimes the quarterback will be off or wide receivers will be off on their timing. So I just don't have that much trust really in this offense. So I think they're going to fare a little underwhelming on Saturday. Yeah,
cold game, Salter under center. It all screams running the football. Leo, do you think that's their key to the game?
That's 100% the key to the game. It's the key to every single game if the Colorado Buffaloes want it. I mean, they just got to show that they want it, especially when the fact that you talk about Caden Salter being in this offense. Because like you mentioned, Balin coming in, the aerial attack was going to be the path, and that's what Colorado has been trying to do the last couple of weeks. I mean, nearly 40 passing attempts from Lewis last Saturday. That was going to be the blueprint. But now with Salter, who's been out of lineup for a couple weeks, going to have to retry to get in the rhythm in a couple short days now, I just don't think it's viable. You got to trust the ground game. Don't give it to Coleman. All right. We made that clear.
The running backs.
But Dallin Hayden and Michael Welch played pretty well last Saturday. They need more touches. All right. Rely on those guys. Draylon Miller, of course, and I think that gives you a more chance to be competitive.
Yeah, and some design runs for Salter would be nice too. That was
course.
something that went in his time never really got used, and it was a constant thing that we have talked about on this show, but it never really came to be before he was ultimately benched. I think overall they're going to fare better than against Arizona State because I do think they'll lean into that run game. Listen, you've got a guy like Caden Salter playing for his career right now. This is the last thing that he can put on tape before trying to go pro, before trying to go to an NFL team, make a preseason roster, go to the UFL, CFL, wherever he may be potentially wanting to continue his career. But this is all he's got. He has to put something on tape against Kansas State. This is his last chance. Didn't get to play on senior night. That's going to be lighting a fire under him. They need to run the football. I think they will, again, out of that necessity.
100%.
So moving forward, both of these teams obviously not where they wanted to be going into the start of the year. Colorado, no one wants to be at 3 wins at this point, and Kansas State was looking to be vying for a college football playoff spot by this point. Neither of them are doing that at all. Lincoln, I'll start with you. Which of these teams has been more disappointing?
Look, CU went into this season knowing it was going to be a rebuilding year, right? Kansas State goes in number 17, right, in the preseason poll. They just got hit by that Ireland game curse. That was on them for Green to go to Ireland. No, but I don't know if you saw after the Utah loss, Chris Kleinman literally was in tears defending his team, and I think he's right. I think on paper, Kansas State should have had a better season. They have been the better team often. It's just been those close games where they lose the lead. They're not getting blown out by Utah, right? It's coming down to those. They were leading, right, in those final minutes, and so yes, they've struggled. It's not where the season should be, but also they still have a chance of actually going to a bowl game. We don't. And then lastly, also they've had it too good. They've had it a little too good. You need a bad season every once in a while. What is it? They've won more than 8 games in 5 of the last 7 years. They won the Big 12 in 2022. Have one bad year,
Sprinkle it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that way next year it'll be, oh, thank God we're not at least as bad as last year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And although a young group going to be coming in for this Kansas State team next year as well, so that'll be interesting to see. Balin, do you think that this has been a disappointing way to see that last group out?
Yeah, I think it very much has been. In terms of the word disappointing, I think Kansas State has had a more disappointing season while CU has had a worse season. But yeah, this K-State team had a lot of potential. They were coming off back-to-back 9-win seasons, 10 wins a year before that. They've had 3 bowl game wins in the last 4 years. Obviously, the Chris Klieman era has been tremendous there at K-State. This is now year 3 of Avery Johnson playing at K-State. So really, yeah, expectations had to be very high for them. They come in ranked. So out of who had a more disappointing season, CU or K-State, I do think it was clearly K-State.
Yeah, absolutely. Those expectations were high, including in my mind, as I've been let know very many times on this show. They were my Big 12 championship pick, but here we are. Leo, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm actually with Lincoln on this one. I think if you look at it straight up for what it is, expectations aside, what's the outcome? 3 wins or 5. I think if you're the Buffaloes, you would much rather have 5 wins right now and looking at an opportunity to punch your way to a bowl game. But that is not where they're at. They're on the flip side of that, and they're trying to play spoiler for Kansas State. And I think as bad as this season has gone for Kansas State, definitely didn't live up to their expectations at all. You might be able to capitalize on a positive note. All right, and there is no positive note for Colorado now moving forward into Saturday. Julian Lewis is not even playing. There is no, benefit to a win other than just moral.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, though, I'm going to go with Kansas State. Maybe it is out of the fact that I picked them to be my Big 12 champions, but they disappointed the heck out of me there. So I'll start with that. The Colorado Buffaloes were expected to be in this 4 to 6 win range, and they could get to that 4 with a win against Kansas State. They're right in that range where they were expected to be, which is bad, but it is still the expectation. Playing on what you said, Balin, I think if you're looking at that word disappointing, not necessarily bad, I think that's going to go to Kansas State. They were, like you said, ranked number 17 in the country coming into this game. They were expected to be competing for the Big 12 championship in this game, for this game to have meanings for the college football playoff, and this to really be a meaningful game for them. it's suddenly not more than getting to the Gasparilla Bowl. So that is certainly more disappointing for me if I was a Kansas State fan. I think that you're going into this season thinking this is our year, this is where we get to the national championship. And as a guy who's watched teams like that in the past, I know that is personally a worse feeling than going in knowing it's going to be bad, and sure enough, it's bad. So just not able to prepare if you're a Kansas State fan is sort of the point I'm trying to make. But let's take a step out now and look around the Big 12 for the last time this season. Let's look at a team that we really have not talked about at all on this show because they have not had anything worth talking about. But we're gonna start today. Oklahoma State, are they the worst team in all of FBS? And where do they place after that, like nationally among the worst teams? Lincoln?
Yeah, I'll keep this simple. 110-08. I rest my case.
Absolutely.
Worst team in the FBS.
And only one other 1-10 team being Boston College in the ACC, which you could argue is a deeper conference.
Out of the Power 4 conferences, yes, I think there's no other team that has to be worse or has had a worse stretch of a couple years than Oklahoma State. As much success as Mike Gundy gave them, I want to take nothing against him. However, he was a little reluctant towards the NIL, so I think is what's kind of setting them back for a couple years here. So all respect to Mike Gundy. I do think he is kind of partially the reason they're here right now, but they went on an 8-week stretch this season where they allowed 43 points a week. So it's just not a place you want to be. Their new head coach is starting 0-8. This has to be the worst Power 4 team right now in the country.
And not a single win over an FBS opponent.
Yeah.
I mean, they lost to Tulsa, ladies and gentlemen. Mm-hmm. Their only win of the season came against UT Martin in Week 1, and they have not won since. That is, I mean, as much as we can sit up here and talk about how awful the Colorado Buffaloes have been to watch, imagine watching a team that hasn't won since September. Leo, your thoughts?
I mean, you can't beat a dead horse, Liam. I think it's actually kind of rude of you to even bring up Oklahoma State on this show, right?
State the facts, man.
I mean, we could have highlighted, good play from any other team, but you chose to pick on, them while they're down.
It's not a dead horse if we haven't talked about them all
down.
season.
All right, Liam. But moving forward, I think as of now, they're the worst program because they're the first team to fire their head coach, of course, too, looking at that. But there is a little bit of optimism now, Liam Howard, with a new signing that I know you want to get into. So let's talk about that as a positive note.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric Morris coming over from North Texas. He's building this team that could still potentially go to the college football playoff as it stands right now. But I mean, now he's signing a contract with a different team. That's a whole nother can of worms. But that's a lot of talent that he can bring over now from that North Texas team. And this is a guy who knows how to build a program in the modern era of college football. I think that's something to be really excited about if you're Oklahoma State. So there is that moving forward. But looking at them as a team this season, it's bad. This is the worst FBS program by far. They've had a weaker schedule than Boston College, the other 1-10 team, and so by default, then it's going to go to them for being the worst team. This past week, they led UCF 14-0 at halftime. It's looking like this might be where they break through. They give their fans something to cheer about. They lose that game to UCF, 17-14, and it wasn't even like UCF had an amazing second half offensively to come back and win this game. They put up 17 points, which is like par for the course. Good job, pat on the back. But that was all it took to get UCF to win that game. So yes, absolutely, this is the worst team in the Power 4 and certainly bottom 20 in the country outside of that. Let's look at the positive teams, though, like you mentioned. We're going to highlight some good. Texas Tech, BYU, and Utah all still in the running for the college football playoff. Out of those teams, which team has the best chance of going all the way and winning the national championship?
I think if Oklahoma State doesn't make it, they're robbed. If they do not make the college football playoff. No, I'm firmly on Texas Tech. And, I hate to say it, they're probably my least favorite team they're my least favorite fans, I think, right now. Tortilla-gate really got my goat, Oh, you can't throw stuff on the field. But I mean, I don't think there's really any argument for BYU, right? You have the head-to-head. Texas Tech wins, and they win big. They can win big, right? Look at the BYU game. But also look at pretty much every other game they've played. I I think on paper they have the best chance, right? Now, if you look at, right, this time last year, we're talking no one had any faith in ASU, right? You know, they win the conference and then they really were the better team against Texas, right? So maybe that could be BYU, but I'm fairly confident if it's going to be anyone, it should be Texas Tech. And I will say in the AP poll, I think it is absurd that they went down this week on a bye after having such a big win last week.
Yeah.
Absurd.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, and if there is such a thing in football as a high-flying team, that is what you could define Texas Tech as. That offense is air raid. They've remained air raid. That is, you think of air raid, and Texas Tech is usually the next two words that come after
Mike
that.
Leach would be happy.
Absolutely.
Red Raiders,
Balin.
air raid. Yeah, it all connects. But no, I'm also going Texas Tech. I also kind of lean with you. I don't really think it's that close. I think they have one of the most dangerous spread out offensive attacks in the league. I believe they have 3 receivers right now with over 500 receiving yards. Their quarterback leads the Big 12 in completion percentage and yards per completion. Running back leads the Big 12 in rushing touchdowns and total touchdowns. They have a linebacker that could be a true Heisman finalist. So I think the biggest point to me is in their 10-1 and their 10 wins so far, their lowest margin of victory in those 10 wins was 22 points. Their lowest margin of victory. Keep in mind, against BYU. So they're not just going in and beating teams. They are like dominating every single team they play. Their only loss was to Arizona State. That was by 4. So again, the other 2 teams in question, they dismantled Utah 34-10. They took down BYU 29-7. This is a very, very complete team. Their defense is averaging 71 opponent rushing yards per game, so they're suffocating on that side too. I just think, in terms of most complete team, I feel like Texas Tech blows it out of the water right now in terms of the Big 12.
Leo, you keeping with that same vibe?
100%. I think, Balin hit every single point on the nail of the head, right? But one team I do want to say that I think could be scary is Utah, all right? Don't underestimate this team because I think when that defense is playing its best and, Dampier is able to do enough on that side of the ball, they're potentially one of the most dangerous teams, and that defense can keep them in it with anybody across the country. But, for all the reasons that Balin said, you got to go with Texas Tech just because they've been the most consistent. They've shown that and they've proved that. And until someone else can beat them, other than ASU, they have that right.
I'm going to go ahead and say there's an old saying in football that the hardest thing to do is beat the same team twice. Yeah. And that's what Texas Tech is going to be tasked with doing against BYU. So I'm going to say that if there is going to be a team from the Big 12 that wins the national championship, this isn't just talking about who has the best chance to make it, just who's going to win the Natty, I got to go BYU. I think that this is a team that is built for longevity, and the college football playoff nowadays is about longevity. You get into January, you get into December, smash mouth running the football, that's what wins, and that's what BYU is built on. I think that if they can beat Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship or potentially in the college football playoff if they have to match up again, they certainly could do that in my opinion, and I think that they are the team that is built to go the rest of the distance after that. All right, we're going to get to our fun segment here. It's the week of Thanksgiving. So we're gonna go with an interesting question here. So we got Thanksgiving dinner. You got a variety of guests. If you could invite 3 from a variety of Big 12 coaches, players, super fans, personalities, past, present, and future, who are the 3 people you're bringing to your Thanksgiving dinner and why?
Yeah. I think my first one would be a hoot. Okay. Kenny Dillingham. All right. He is arguably the Lane Kiffin of Big 12 coaches with ADHD. Stop. And but I really think he could be just a hoot. Right. He's a fun guy. I think number 2, right, we got Mike Leach. Right. Talk about someone who's going to bring some character to the Thanksgiving table.
RIP.
Right, talk about someone who's going to bring some fun discussion topics with very thorough, hilarious answers. I think of like the Pac-12 mascots who would win in a fight, or the fact that he literally was like probably the smartest person to ever coach college football. Taught a history class randomly, and then lastly, I'm going Mike Gundy's gay son. I discovered that Mike Gundy had a gay son when he was fired, and yeah, it really what it makes me think of is Mike Gundy gay son or Lane Kiffin thought daughter.
You never know.
But I think I'm actually going with Baker Mayfield because he's the Johnny Manziel of Johnny Manziels. He would show up drunk and he would be a great time. And I rest my case.
Yeah, that's an interesting mix right there. I'll give it to you. I'm going to take a different direction here. I'm only inviting 2 people, all right? And I'm inviting our Miss Peggy, of course, out of pure respect. Love Peggy. I've had the pleasure to meet her once. Gave her a fist bump. It's good. And then I'm going to invite Scott Frost, okay, because of his time at Nebraska. All right, and listen, my strategy, obviously it's Thanksgiving dinner. People are going to fight. It's Thanksgiving. I am there to mix the pot. All right, I want Peggy to throw some punches. I want that CU Nebraska rivalry to spark up again, and I just want to sit back and watch it happen.
Smart. Yeah, absolutely, and that's certainly a much more fun argument to watch than some of the other ones that happen at Thanksgiving every year.
I mean, obviously I'm a football guy. I love that sport almost more than anything. But Thanksgiving, it's a good time to reflect, to be with the family, cherish your loved ones. And I think starting off with a CU figure, you got to have the voice. You got to have Mark Johnson at the Thanksgiving table. He's going to bring that common presence. He's like that big uncle that everyone looks up to. He's going to come in with the fire Thanksgiving Day prayer, great word, to bring to the table. And I think that's just someone you want in your corner. I want a wholesome, happy, football-centered Thanksgiving, unlike you guys over here. And, moving forward, I think you got to go with the legend Barry Sanders as well. Played at Oklahoma State University. This is a guy, who's arguably one of the greatest at his positions to ever do it. Got that coaching instinct in him as well. He's going to be able to share so much about the game. I want to hear what Barry Sanders has to say. And, speaking of hearing what people want to say, the great Tom Landry was at the University of Texas, all right, at one point in time, which means he is eligible to come down to this Big 12 Thanksgiving dinner.
Yes.
And he's got a seat at my table because I could not even begin to tell you the kind of questions I'd have for that man and want to hear the football lore and just what goes on through those kind of guys' heads, all right? Because these are people who've been around, decades longer than I have, and I'd be very appreciative to hear what they have to bring to the table.
For me, I'm bringing in two CU buffs. I'm going to bring in Miss Peggy, of course. I'm going to bring Coach Prime with her, though. That chemistry that those two have together, I think that would be a very wholesome and fun Thanksgiving dinner. I think that Coach Prime is going to certainly bring some sort of energy and weird talking points. He's at least going to get conversation started, so there's that for sure. He might give you a motivational speech about why you're not eating enough turkey, but I think it might hit home at some point, and Miss Peggy's going to be there to back him up. She's going to bring some incredible stories. I mean, that lady has watched so many CU football games throughout the years. Being able to hear about all of the things that she could talk about would be absolutely wonderful. And then just for the fun of it, I'm going to bring Mike Gundy. I mean, if you think of your drunk uncle showing up to Thanksgiving dinner,
your unemployed drunk uncle.
Yes, showing up to Thanksgiving dinner, his dish is like a cooked raccoon or something like that, and then he shows up and he's just an absolute riot, and everyone tells stories about that specific Thanksgiving where Uncle Gundy came to town. I think that is absolutely what he is going to bring to this Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, this is a year where he was, or just earlier this year, he's coaching a terrible football team and lifting his shirt up in the press conference after the game to flex his abs with the reporters. I think that is a guy I would absolutely love to have at my Thanksgiving. But we got some great football on for this Thanksgiving weekend. We're going to go over the games and make our picks around the Big 12, starting off with Utah taking on Kansas. Lincoln, who do you got winning this game?
I got Utah. Pretty simple. I mean, I think we all were talking about Utah for a bit there. I mean, I would be shooken if they lose this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, Utah right now, they're on a bender. They won 4 straight. In that stretch, their offense has dropped 53, 45, 55, and 51 points. So they're on an absolute heater right now. Quarterback Devin Dampier right now is balling out. Kansas hasn't fared super great in Big 12 play this year. I think Utah covers.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty simple on this one. I just talked about their defense and how I think that at their best, this team can make a far run. Give me Utah over Kansas.
Yeah, I'm going to go the same route. I think Utah, the blitzes that were coming after Caden Salter when Colorado played them and how he's saying that these are blitzes he's never seen in his life, certainly going to be something that Kansas's offensive line is going to say they've never seen in their lives. That is a porous offensive line, and they are going to have a difficult time stopping that pass rush. I think also their defense is a pushover, really no other way to describe it. Utah's offense is going to have their way and win by a lot. Then let's move to a closer game. We got a rivalry game on our hands, Arizona and Arizona State. Lincoln, who do you got?
This one's going to be good. Last year they plant the trident in the Arizona Stadium. I got ASU. If we're talking head-to-head versus the Buffs, obviously Arizona beats them out a little bit. But I think this is a rivalry game. You have a team that has just so much grit in them, that has just found ways to win, right? We just spent so much time glazing Texas Tech. Let's talk about the team that beat Texas Tech. Arizona, okay. I could see they maybe have a chance, but I'm going Sun Devils.
So, believe it or not, I'm actually going with Arizona going into ASU and getting the win. Right now, ASU their offense has hit a little bit of a weird skid, minus the game against us. They have not scored more than 30 points since week 3. So just take out the CU game. Their offense really isn't consistently putting up firecracker numbers. And the Wildcats right now are kind of secretly top 30 in points per game and opponent points per game. So kind of a sneaky good squad here. Arizona also on a 4-game win streak. Like we said, they dropped 52 against us just last week, dropped 41 against Baylor. I just think it's right time for Arizona to kind of pull off a sneaky win here on the road.
Arizona rolling, and they're not just winning those games, they're blowing teams out. So that's certainly something to look at if you're Arizona State. Leo, who are you taking?
Rivalries are so fun, right? And I think at the end of the day, they're more 50-50 than any other game you're going to see throughout the season. But when you talk about a team in, Arizona State, I like their head coach, Kenny Dillingham, just a little bit more, right? Now, but you look at the quarterback battle, then you see, I take Noah Fafita over Jeff Sims every day. So then you're kind of torn and split. But I think at the end of the day, at home, Arizona State with Kenny Dillingham, who I'm just the biggest fan of, I think they're going to have a good game plan to come in, do a little bit things to get Arizona off their rock a little bit. I think they're going to rely on Raleek Brown, who brought up Raleek Brown? Was it you, Lincoln? Yeah. That you mentioned. He had a phenomenal game. Give him the ball. Feed the hot hand. Jordan Tyson's another week back from injury. He's only going to be getting healthier. That offense is going to be clicking and ready to go.
For me, I'm going to take Arizona. I think that Arizona is just on too much of a roll right now. This is the type of high-stakes game that they have proven to be built for over these last several weeks. It really, in these rivalry games, with how close they're going to be, you got to win by 40 to win by 1. And they have been winning by about that margin over these teams that they have played. I think that's something that they're going to be able to do against Arizona State. And, of course, Arizona State just got done playing Colorado. They're in for a rude awakening and a quick adjustment they're going to have to make to a much, much, much better team. Next up, we're going to look at another interesting game. Not a whole ton of implications in it, but should be very good. Houston and Baylor. Lincoln, who are you taking?
I'm taking Houston, and here's why. If you can beat Ryan Staub, you can beat anyone, except for the teams you lost to. But I really could care less about this game, but go Cougs.
Yeah, this one I think in my eyes is a little bit of a toss-up. Obviously, you just look at the record and you want to give it to Houston, but they've had kind of a bad streak. 2 weeks ago, they let West Virginia score 45 on them at home. And then week after that, they lose 17-14 to TCU. So I think they're right now in just a little bit of a bad skid. So I just think Baylor has a good opportunity to really pounce on them. So I'm going actually the upset. Baylor's at home. I'm going a low-scoring team. I just think Houston's in a weird spot. I don't really think they're the same team we saw at midseason. So give me the Bears actually pulling off the upset.
Interesting. All right, you going that same route or are you changing it?
I am actually going to ride with Houston, but here's why. I think Baylor is a team, much like the Buffaloes, they find ways to beat themselves, right? They don't find ways to go out and get a victory. And I think playing against this Houston team who has familiarity and can get hot and can beat people, they're going to be at a disadvantage. I think just straight up roster for roster, Houston's the more talented team. Whether or not they're able to perform and execute to that, that's going to be a completely different conversation. I do like the coaching that Baylor has, and I think they're going to be set up to, play prideful and defend their home turf. But I think Houston, they've locked up bowl eligibility. They're looking to try to collect another win to help get them a better destination, and I think they're going to come out with a victory.
I'm going to go ahead and say Houston is going to win this game, and I think that there's a main reason for that. Baylor, as good as their offense is, Sawyer Robertson, one of the best quarterbacks in the country, their defense is somehow worse. We mentioned those teams that Arizona was blowing out. Baylor's the most recent victim. Baylor gave up 41 points to that Arizona offense, and as good as Arizona is right now, this Baylor defense has been doing that all season long. They have been getting blown out, and no matter how good their offense is and how they're able to keep them in games, they're not able to close these games out because they can't get stops. So I'm going to take Houston on that. Houston's got a better defense, and I think that they're going to be able to limit Sawyer Robertson just enough for Connor Wigman and company to thrive against the Baylor defense and pick up the win for their team. So next up, we move to another very offensive battle right here. This is going to be Cincinnati and TCU. Lincoln, who you got in this one?
Yeah, I got TCU, and with this one, I really don't care about on-field performance. What I care about is fan behavior. You know, what we saw in Cincinnati this weekend was just unacceptable. I could never imagine a fan base and student section treating BYU like Cincinnati did this weekend.
It's terrible.
Okay. BYU fans are nothing but incredible people. You know, how could you do Bear like that? You know,
yeah.
Just a good guy. You know, their coach, just nicest man on earth. Kalani, right?
Yeah.
Great dude. Who would ever say something like that? You know, and for that, I believe they deserve karma. I believe TCU destroys them.
Wow, okay. Yeah, this one's pretty interesting to me. Kind of both teams are in a weird little slump right now. Offensively, TCU the last 3 weeks, we've scored 17, 14, then 17 points. It's really not moving the ball that much. But Cincinnati, right, we saw them a very sneaky pick to win the Big 12 there for a little bit, but they have had a full breakdown from that point. They got blown out by Utah, took losses to Arizona and BYU the last couple weeks. Their offense has just hit a wall. I don't think they can't score more than 20 points in the last 3 weeks from what I've seen. So I'm going to go another low-scoring game. TCU is still 7-4, though. They're not a bad squad, so I think because TCU is at home, I'm going to give them the win.
Absolutely, and still looked at as an offensive battle, but like you mentioned,
yeah,
both of these teams, talented offenses that have been spinning their tires so far. What do you think?
Man, you talk about the talented offenses. I think it only takes one game to get really back and going. You talk about the Cincinnati team. They were so high up, you know, going into the Utah game that you had mentioned there, Balin. And that collapse, they're going to be able to figure it out. All right, they're going to be able to restart, get the wheels turning again, going into their final game of the season. And against an opponent like TCU, who's shown they can give up a lot of points. Their defense really doesn't scare anybody, you know, Liam, per se. And I think that's just going to be the area that ultimately TCU is going to lose this game because of their defense.
Yeah, I think that their defense is the one thing that has remained consistent throughout the season, and that's consistently poor. They have not put together a good defense. Even when their offense has done well, their defense has not been able to catch up and keep them a good team and allow them to capitalize on that. Cincinnati has had moments where their defense has played well, and that was really what was when they were really at the peak of their trending upwards towards maybe getting to the Big 12 title game. That is what was getting them there. Their offense was playing well as it had all season, but their defense was stepping up, making key stops. TCU has not been able to do that at any point this season, so I think if one of these teams is going to rebound this week, it's going to be Cincinnati, so give me the Bearcats. But that moves us to our final Colorado game of this season. Colorado traveling on the road to the Little Apple in Manhattan to take on Kansas State. Lincoln, who do you got?
Look, Kansas State more than any game last year haunts me. That game haunts me, you know. Truly just, I walked home in complete silence. And I would say that, you know, CU would be playing this like a revenge game from last year, but half our team wasn't there for that, you know. They have something on the line, okay? They could make a bowl. They could keep a non-losing season, just have something to give their fans. I think they will be playing their hearts out. They're at home, okay? On the opposite side, the Buffs suck. I mean, just like, Colorado's bad, okay?
Yep.
Like, I have almost zero faith in this team. I also think most of them are already halfway out the door. right? I mean, you think about the coaching staff, right? We have the head coach just openly saying now, like, a lot of these guys are going to be gone. Are you really going to be like, all right, this is the game where after getting blown out 2 times, arguably 3 times, if I can win this game, I keep my job? No, like, I don't think there's really anyone's playing for anything for Colorado. Even Caden Salter, like, I think he's still just going to be bitter and mediocre. And, yeah, I have no faith.
Yeah. As much as I do love the role that college football teams play as spoilers, we've seen time and time again, a better away team comes in playing in a vital game, and, the team that doesn't have to play for anything pulls off some magic. So as much as I want to believe that, I'm also going to go with Kansas State here to pull this one out. Especially with Salter getting the start, as much as we talk about the offense, I think I have way more or less faith in the defense, actually. I believe this unit is just in a really bad spot that just needs the season to end. So defensively alone, I don't think we can win this game. And I don't really see a world where this offense scores more than 24 or 28 points. So unfortunately, give me K-State.
Leo, any faith in the Buffs?
You know what? Covering this team for 3 seasons, 4-8 season, 9-4, 9-4. Coming back to this season, I have never picked against the Buffs, Liam Howard. All right. But I think with the state this team is in, with the fact that Julian Lewis is redshirting, there is no way you can come out here and pick the Caden Salter-led Colorado Buffaloes to go on the road and find a victory when they haven't done that all season. They've been absolutely atrocious on the road. That is actually the fact where they've gotten the worst of their beatings. Yeah. And to think that they're going to be able to magically turn it around in 1 week, like Lincoln said, when they haven't been able to do it off a bye week. I mean, they had a full bye week to come out and put a game plan together and put up 17 points off of 4 turnovers. You only got 3 points off of 4 turnovers. I don't think you can expect your defense to come out and find 4 turnovers against Avery Johnson and this team. Kansas State's not doing that at home. You're not getting these short fields. You're not going to get the advantageous positions you've been in. With all that being said, as much as it pains me, I'm not going to pick Colorado. And I'm hoping that maybe me doing that is a reverse jinx and they can figure it out and find a W.
Like
but load the graphic, K-State. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Colorado has yet to play a full 60 minutes of football this season. They go down the road to get food. They stay in the locker room, whatever the case may be. Colorado has not played a full game of football. The defense gets tired walking up the stairs, and now they have to face Kansas State, who just rushed for 472 total yards against a Utah defense that held Colorado to 7 points with their backups.
They might get 500 on Colorado.
They just may. It's an absolute recipe for disaster. But in the face of recipes for disaster, all season long I've ridden with this team. Caden Salter's back in, but there's no way he hasn't learned anything still to this point in the season. He's gotten benched multiple times, and surely in one of those, he's got to say, all right, I'm running the football. I'll do it. I'll do what I was doing at Liberty that's going to get me some success. I think the Buffs are pissed off. They want nothing more than to ruin Kansas State's bowl chances. So I just can't pick Colorado all season long, guys. Come on.
Wow, really?
I got my Kansas State purple on. I can't do it. They've killed my record. This is my show. I do what I want. Give me the Buffs by a million. I don't care that they're ruining my record.
Yeah.
CU wins against Kansas State. Plays spoiler. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this season on SBS Football Live. It has been a pleasure, and even though this season's been terrible, it's been a blast to talk Colorado football in front of you all. So, for Liam, Leo, Lincoln, and Balin, for one final time this season, you heard it here first.